They say there is an oak in the low country whose branches have tasted more than just wind. It stands at the edge of the fields, gnarled and black against the dusk, roots sunk deep in red clay that has drunk more blood than rain. The tree has no voice, yet those who walk near it swear they hear whispers carried on its leaves. Some say it remembers. Some say it judges. All agree it watches. Beyond it rises the plantation house, whitewashed and glowing like a false temple against the dying light. From afar it seems proud, even noble. Up close, the paint is chipped, the windows cracked, and the air around it reeks of liquor and cruelty. But the house is not the soul of this land. The oak is. Its crooked arms stretch toward the heavens, but not in prayer. They are the arms of a witness too weary to speak. The wind moves through the fields in hushed strokes, carrying with it the murmur of insects and the sigh of weary men bent beneath the weight of chains and dusk. Shadows lengthen. The horizon burns low with a crimson that looks too much like a wound. In that silence, the legend begins, though it is not born tonight. It has been ripening for years, festering like a sore left to rot in the sun. A crow lands on one of the high branches and croaks once, a jagged sound that breaks the stillness. Beneath its perch, the rope marks still scar the bark, faint but not forgotten. The oak has held bodies before. It will hold them again. Those who tell this story say it is not about vengeance, nor justice, but something older, something deeper. The soil of the South knows the weight of cruelty. It devours it, season after season, and yet it never grows clean. The tree has been watered by suffering, nourished by silence, and it waits with patience older than any man's rage. The night grows darker. Lanterns flicker in the big house. Laughter spills out, harsh and careless, carried across the fields where men labor even as the stars rise. The oak does not laugh. It stands. It remembers. It keeps its secrets until the hour when secrets will no longer be enough. And so the tale begins, not with a man, but with a tree that has already chosen him. They called him Silas, though the name was rarely spoken in kindness. On the plantation, names were less than breath, more like chains that rattled when a master chose to call. But Silas carried his name the way he carried the scars across his back, silent, unbending, etched so deep no man could take them away. He moved through the fields like a shadow, never wasting words, his silence heavier than iron. The other men bent beneath the sun, their bodies swaying like reeds in the wind, but Silas's movements were deliberate, almost ritual. Each strike of his hoe into the soil was measured, as if he were speaking in a language only the earth could understand. His shoulders bore lashes, his hands bore calluses, but his eyes bore something else, a sorrow that refused to die, and beneath it, something more dangerous still, endurance. The master rode among them often, boots polished, whip dangling like a serpent eager to strike. He was a man who laughed too loud and drank too much, who mistook cruelty for power and obedience for respect. He delighted in breaking men the way some boys delight in snapping the necks of birds. To him, Silas was nothing more than another back to whip, another mouth to silence, another shadow that bent when commanded. Yet Silas did not bend as others did. He obeyed, yes, for disobedience meant death. But there was a quiet defiance in his eyes, an unsettling stillness that made even the master look twice before turning away. Like the oak, Silas watched, and though he never spoke, his silence became a kind of thunder waiting to break. At night, when the others whispered their griefs into the dark, Silas lay awake beneath the broken roof of the quarters, his gaze fixed on the outline of the oak against the moon. He did not pray. He did not weep. His silence was not the silence of defeat, but the silence of waiting. The scars across his back itched like old wounds that never healed, reminders that pain was not meant to end. It was meant to be answered. The master never noticed. Men like him rarely did. To him, Silas was another nameless shadow among the fields, another set of hands to bleed dry. But the oak noticed. The earth noticed. The silence noticed. And if Silas himself did not yet know it, the branches of the oak were already bending toward his destiny. The night was swollen with heat, thick and breathless, when the master decided to make a spectacle of pain. He gathered them in the yard, men, women, even children still clinging to their mother's skirts, summoned like cattle before slaughter. A lantern swung from his hand, throwing wild shadows across faces drawn tight with dread. The oak loomed at the edge of the gathering, its crooked arms stretching into the dark, a witness carved against the stars. The victim was chosen with drunken whim. A man too weary to rise quickly when ordered, too broken to mask his stumble. His name was Jonah, though the master never bothered to remember it. He was dragged forward, wrists bound, his eyes wide with the knowledge of what was coming. The crowd lowered their heads, for to watch too openly was to invite the whip. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the creak of rope and the master's slurred laughter. The lash cracked once, then again, tearing flesh from bone. Each strike echoed like a gunshot, and the night air filled with the sharp scent of iron. Jonah gasped but did not cry out, his pride refusing to give the master that victory. The master grew angrier with every silence, demanding sound, demanding submission. He whipped harder, faster, until the air itself seemed to shudder with the violence. Silas stood among the gathered, his face carved from stone. He did not flinch, though each strike felt as though it landed on his own back, reopening his own wounds. His eyes never left the master. Not the whip, not Jonah's blood, not the lantern light shaking in the dark. Only the master, drunk on power, blind in arrogance, reveling in cruelty like a child crushing ants. And then, just for a flicker of a heartbeat, the master's eyes met Silas's. It was only a glance, but something in that silence unsettled him. For in Silas's gaze there was no fear, no plea, no surrender. There was only stillness, deep and fathomless, like the calm before a storm. The master looked away quickly, laughing too loudly, pretending he had not felt the chill that crawled up his spine. The oak creaked in the wind, though no wind moved. Jonah fell, broken but breathing, and the crowd was dismissed to their shadows once more. The laughter of the master followed them into the night, shrill and hollow. But the spark had already lit in Silas's eyes, a spark too small for the master to notice, yet large enough to burn the world. The moon rose pale and cold, casting its silver light across the broken cabins and fields that stretched like scars across the land. While others slept in uneasy fits, Silas remained awake, his body still, his mind restless. He sat on the worn step outside the quarters, his gaze fixed on the oak. In the moonlight, its branches resembled outstretched arms, crooked and waiting, a gallows carved by God himself. The rope scars in its bark gleamed faintly, pale lines etched like veins across a body that had fed too long on death. In his hands, Silas turned a shard of iron, a tool dulled by work and sharpened by hunger. Slowly, deliberately, he drew its edge across a stone, grinding it into something dangerous. The rhythm was soft, almost like the sound of breathing. To anyone watching, it would look like a man preparing his tool for labor. But to Silas, it was a different kind of work, the quiet forging of destiny. He studied the master, though never openly. He knew when a man drank too much, when his swagger slowed to a stumble, when his laughter thickened into slurred curses. He learned the hour when the master wandered the yard, alone and unguarded, a predator too arrogant to see the trap beneath his feet. Silas memorized each pattern, storing them like seeds hidden in soil. The whispers of the enslaved filled the nights, prayers for mercy, songs too soft to be called songs. But Silas kept his silence, for words had long since withered inside him. His silence was a weapon, and he wielded it as carefully as the rope he planned to knot. He did not pray for freedom, nor for forgiveness. He did not pray at all. Prayer was for men who believed someone was listening. Silas believed only in the oak. The air grew heavier with each passing night, as though the land itself sensed what was coming. The crickets fell silent when Silas sharpened the blade. The dogs did not bark when he walked the edge of the yard beneath the moon. Even the oak seemed to lean closer, its branches bowing low, whispering a promise only he could hear. When the hour comes, I will hold him. And so Silas prepared, each breath, each step, each heartbeat winding tighter around the silence he carried. The master laughed louder, drank deeper, blind to the storm building at his very doorstep. The night would come soon. The rope would creak again, and the oak was already waiting. The night was thick with shadows, a velvet darkness pierced only by the glow of lanterns trembling in the distance. The air carried the sharp tang of liquor and sweat, drifting from the big house where the master drank deep into his own arrogance. Silas moved like a ghost through the yard, his steps measured, his eyes unblinking. He carried no weapon in sight, only the quiet weight of something older than steel, a silence sharpened into resolve. The master called for him, voice slurred, dragging his words like chains. Silas appeared as commanded, head lowered, the perfect mask of obedience. Together they walked, though only one of them understood where their path truly led. The master, stumbling, spoke of nothing and everything, boasting of land, of money, of power carved from other men's backs. His laughter rolled out into the night, loud enough to wake the crows. Silas answered with nothing. His silence was his reply. The oak rose before them, tall and dark, its crooked arms stretching across the sky like a question that demanded blood for an answer. Lantern light flickered against its bark, catching the pale scars where rope had bitten deep before. The master did not notice. He saw only a tree, not a witness. Only a shadow, not a gallows. He leaned against its trunk to steady himself, the liquor dragging him down, his arrogance holding him upright. In Silas's hands, the rope unfurled, quiet as a snake slipping through grass. He had hidden it away for weeks, weaving it from fragments and fibers stolen unnoticed. Each strand had been twisted with patience, bound with intention. In his palms it felt alive, heavy with purpose. The master, too drunk to see, laughed at some joke only he understood, his voice echoing hollow through the branches. The night grew still. The insects stopped their song. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Silas lifted his eyes to the oak, and for a moment, man and tree seemed bound together by something eternal. The rope slid over the branch with a soft hiss, and the noose took shape against the moonlight. The master swayed, head drooping, oblivious. Silas stood close now, his shadow merging with the trees. The rope dangled between them, waiting. The oak creaked softly, as if in anticipation. The night thickened. The silence deepened. And in that silence, history itself seemed to pause, leaning forward to watch. It happened in a single breath, the way a storm breaks after days of suffocating heat. One moment the master was swaying against the oak, grinning drunkenly at his own muttered jokes. The next, the rope was around his throat, pulled tight by hands that had known only labor, pain, and silence. His laughter choked into a sharp gasp, his eyes bulged wide, and the night shattered with the sound of his strangled cry. The rope groaned against the oak's scarred branch, fibers straining, bark tearing. The master kicked violently, boots scraping against the earth, clawing at the noose that bit deeper with every thrash. His power, his cruelty, all the years of arrogance that had once made him untouchable, none of it mattered now. The oak did not care for titles. The rope did not care for wealth. Justice had come dressed in silence, and it would not be denied. Silas stood firm, his body rigid, muscles carved into iron from years of forced toil. He pulled with the weight of centuries behind him, not just his suffering, but the suffering of all who had bent, bled, and broken before him. His face remained unreadable, yet in his eyes burned something vast and merciless. Not rage, not triumph, but the quiet inevitability of a man fulfilling destiny. He said nothing. His silence was louder than any scream. The master's thrashing slowed, his legs buckling, his gasps breaking into wet, desperate gurgles. His hands clawed at Silas's arms, pleading with fingers that had once struck him, burned him, branded him like cattle. The plea meant nothing. The silence answered with nothing. The master's strength drained into the earth, into the roots of the oak, leaving him dangling, a man reduced to a carcass swaying in the night. The rope creaked, steady as a heartbeat. The oak bent beneath the weight, its branch holding fast, as though it had waited all its life for this burden. The shadows flickered across Silas's face, painting him both executioner and martyr, both man and myth. When the last twitch of life left the master's body, the night did not sigh with relief. It did not sing with triumph. It simply stood still, heavy and eternal, as though the world itself was stunned into silence. Silas released the rope, but did not look back. He turned into the darkness, swallowed by the trees beyond the oak. Behind him, the body swayed gently in the moonlight, a grotesque pendulum marking the end of one life and the beginning of a legend. Dawn came slow and gray, the kind of light that creeps rather than rises, unwilling to touch the land it reveals. Mist clung to the fields, curling low around the stalks like smoke from an unseen fire. Birds circled but did not sing. The plantation stirred with unease, shadows moving from cabin to cabin, whispers slipping through cracked doors before words could form into sound. Something was different. Something had broken. It was the children who saw it first. Their small voices carried through the morning air, startled cries that drew women from their beds and men from their toil. They gathered at the edge of the yard, their faces pale, eyes wide with the sight before them. The master's body hanging from the oak, limp and swaying, boots barely grazing the earth. The rope creaked with each subtle shift of wind, a sound too steady, too final. Some gasped, others fell to their knees, but none dared to speak too loud. Fear sealed their throats. They looked for guards, for overseers, for anyone who might demand answers. But the yard was empty, save for the body and the tree that held it. And of Silas, there was no sign. His pallet lay untouched, his few belongings gone, as though he had melted into the night itself. Whispers spread like sparks on dry grass. Some said he had fled into the swamps, where no white man would follow, swallowed by mud and shadow. Others whispered he had not fled at all, but been taken by spirits of the forest, carried away as payment for the blood he spilled. A few, their voices trembling with awe, said Silas was not a man at all. He was the storm given flesh, the silence of centuries finally speaking. The overseers arrived, faces drawn and pale, and for once their whips hung useless at their sides. They cut the master down, but the rope burned their hands, and the oak seemed to groan in protest. The body fell with a thud, heavy and unholy, and still the silence lingered. No one wept. No one dared to laugh. The air was thick with something older than fear, something close to reverence. As the sun climbed, the fields were filled with uneasy labor, yet eyes strayed again and again toward the oak. The branch where the rope had hung bent low, scarred, marked forever. And though Silas was gone, his name clung to every tongue, spoken in whispers that felt like prayers. By nightfall, those whispers had already become something else, songs without melody, stories without endings. And Silas himself had vanished into the land, leaving only legend behind. Years passed, but the story of that night did not fade. It lingered in the soil, in the roots of the oak, in the hushed voices of those who had seen the master's body swaying against the dawn. The plantation changed hands, seasons came and went, but Silas's name was never spoken without a shiver. Travelers who rode past the land told of strange silences that fell when their horses neared the oak. No birds perched on its branches, no cattle grazed in its shade. On moonless nights, the wind made the rope creak, though no rope was there. Some swore they saw a figure standing beneath it, a tall man, shadow-faced, watching with eyes that gleamed like embers. The old one said Silas had not fled. He had not hidden. He had become part of the land itself. The swamp, the forest, the mist at dawn, all carried his presence. His silence became the silence of the fields, his strength the strength of the trees, his rage the storm that split the skies. Children were told in whispers, Do not wander near the oak at night. For the man who hanged his master still walks there, guarding, waiting. Among the enslaved, his name grew into something larger than a man. Silas was not just flesh and bone. He was vengeance made eternal, proof that even chains could break, even cruelty could be answered. Around fires, mothers told their children that he had risen into legend to watch over them, that his silence was not absence but protection. For the masters, though, his story carried a different weight. They spoke of him only behind locked doors, voices low and sharp. To them, Silas was not a legend but a warning, a reminder that even those ground down into dust still carried the power to rise, to strike, to haunt. The oak stood as both gallows and shrine, a scar they could not cut down. And so the tale endured, not written in books but etched in memory, in soil, in song. The oak tree grew older, gnarled and vast, its branches forever bent as if bearing the weight of a body long gone. Travelers still pause when they pass it, feeling the hush that clings like a shadow, feeling eyes that are not there. No grave marks Silas's resting place. No stone bears his name. But the land remembers. The people remember. And the oak remembers most of all, its roots drinking deep the silence of a man who became a legend, a slave who hanged his master and vanished into eternity.